I'm Matt Harkins, Director of the Literary Arts Institute of the College of St. Benedict. I'd like to welcome you to our Minnesota Street Reading Series for the 2020-2021 academic year. Tonight, we're joined by Mutsuki Mockett, whose most recent book, American Harvest, God, Country, and Farming in the Heartland, was the winner of our Sister Mariella Gable Prize, given each year to a work of outstanding literature published by Grey Wolf Press. And American Harvest is, without a doubt, extraordinary. Though she grew up in California, Marie's father's family raised wheat on over 7,000 acres in Nebraska. Even after the family moved away, uncles and cousins returned each year to their acreage to join Eric Wolgemuth's harvesting crew when the wheat ripened. This book recounts the year when Marie joined this harvesting crew for an entire season, starting in Texas and following the ripening wheat across the plains up into Idaho. Although many cultural and political differences separated Marie from the crew, they come from evangelical farming communities that are largely culturally conservative. And Marie is a writer from the liberal West Coast whose mother's family owns a Buddhist temple in Japan. Both Marie and the harvesters were open to listening to and learning from each other. Tonight, Marie will start by reading from her book. Her friend Juston Wolgemuth, who was part of his father's harvesting crew, will then join us for questions and conversation. If you have a question you would like to ask, either of them, be sure to add it in the YouTube chat. And without any further ado, we'll begin. Will you please join me in welcoming Marie Mutsuki Mockett?
Thank you so much, Matt. Thank you so much for this honor, and it's a great pleasure to be here and to share American Harvest with you. I really wish I could be there in person. When I first heard that I had the chance to go to Minnesota, I said yes immediately, and I really wish I could be there. But in place of that, I'm happy that I at least get to share with you virtually. I'm going to read a couple of brief sections from American Harvest, here it is, to you this evening, and then take some questions. And I'm extremely fortunate that Juston Wolgemuth, who will feature in some of the sections that I'm reading, is here to talk with us. We have said from the beginning that American Harvest, in many ways, is a book about conversation, and we are in a very intense period, I know, in the United States right now as we are getting ready for our election. And I've been very lucky that I've been able to continue to talk to Juston and his family, even though they're busy harvesting, because harvesting has continued. And so we will be looking forward to sharing some of what we talk about with you. So I'm going to read a couple of sections. American Harvest, as Matt explained, follows the course that a group of custom harvesters take as they begin cutting wheat in Texas and moving along following the wheat as it ripens. And I'm going to read a little bit from chapter 2, which explains what the harvest crew is doing, and then I'll read a little bit deeper in the book when we've moved from Texas through Oklahoma, Kansas, and then now we're in Colorado. So I'm going to read a section from Texas, a little section, and then a section from Colorado. Eric's annual route always starts in Texas because that is where American wheat first ripens. The crew will follow the wheat belt north as it continues to mature. The wheat ripens at a rate of about 20 miles a day. Over the years, Eric has built up relationships with farmers who own land in each of the 7 states, and they all work on the assumption that he is coming to cut their crops. Each year, the arrangements are made on a handshake. There are no paper contracts. For harvest this year, Eric is traveling with Emily and Juston. His older son, Winston, usually accompanies him, but his wife is expecting a new child and he will stay home in Pennsylvania with her. 2 other family members are with the harvest crew, Bradford and Bethany, who are brother and sister, are Eric's nephew and niece. Bradford is 22, and Bethany will turn 20 while on the road. The others are young men from the community back home. Competition to get into Eric's crew is fierce, and most of these boys will have called a year in advance for an interview and a chance to participate. Rain or shine, they will be paid a daily flat fee and will be fed, housed, and given a chance to see the United States. This year there is Luther, the oldest at 25, Michael, who is 22, Samuel, who is also 22, and Amos, who is 23. This is the first year that a woman has been part of the group. Bethany and I will share a trailer that Eric purchased. A few days before I arrive, Eric drove 1,400 miles with his crew from Lancaster, Pennsylvania to Hydro, Oklahoma, where a friend and fellow harvester, Dwayne, lives. The combines and tractors were all ferried on the backs of flatbeds hauled by semi-trucks. Eric dissuaded me from making this drive and asked me instead to fly to the Will Rogers World Airport in Oklahoma City, where I pick up a rental car, a small SUV that still feels larger than anything I'm used to. I drive through a heavy rainstorm, and after it passes, I see a rainbow in my rear-view mirror. Eric has given me directions. I thought that when I asked for a landmark, he would direct me to something like a McDonald's in town. But he does not choose a place whose logo juts obtrusively out of the land. His instructions imply a faith in my powers of observation. He has told me to look for a bridge where there's work being done, and that once I see the bridge, I will see 2 combines. Along the way, I pass signs for Halliburton, Hobby Lobby, and Trump, Pence, and then I turn off the interstate and there is the bridge with yellow tape, and there are the combines set up on trailers attached to 2 semi-trucks. The rigs are parked on a farmer's gravel lot by an unused barn. The rain has now completely passed and the combines gleam in the sun, a glossy, confident red against the green and gold landscape. Each combine costs anywhere from about $250,000 to $350,000. With its hydraulic lift and changeable header, a combine is about as close to a transformer as you will find in the real world. Each one weighs nearly 30,000 pounds, which means it must be carefully placed on the back of a semi-truck to be hauled across the country. All the different pieces of harvesting equipment are a bit like pieces of a puzzle, with space at a premium. To accommodate 3 combines, 4 headers, a tractor, 3 grain hoppers, and a grain cart, all of which must be loaded onto 4 semi-trucks, Eric has devised different ways to transport each configuration. One truck has a combine and a hopper behind it, and another has a combine with a hopper and 2 headers fitted inside. The header is the knife of the combine and the part that cuts the wheat. This particular hauling method requires that the combine face forward, and when I arrive, Juston is wrapping the front windshield with a thick plastic sheet for protection. "One rock," Eric says, "and that glass shatters into a million pieces, and it's miserable cutting without a windshield." It is decided that Juston will drive me into the camp where the trailer houses are. This will happen a lot over the course of the spring and the summer. The men will do the driving. There are practical reasons for how and why this happens. I often do not know where I am going, and the men do. Juston also jokes to me that I'm about 8 years old in farm years. The age is not chosen arbitrarily. 10 is about when kids start to drive tractors, and I cannot truly drive a tractor. Juston chats happily. "It's been a while since I've driven a passenger car," he says. "It feels so small." There is something about the way he confidently zips along these country roads that makes me feel as though in his capable hands the SUV has shrunk to the size of a roller coaster car. Juston attends a Christian university in Pennsylvania where he is majoring in English. He is tall, good-looking, and a little bit brooding, with a fuzzy beard, mustache, and blonde hair of an indeterminate texture and length because he keeps it hidden under a Wheeler Brothers grain cap at almost all times. Juston's smiles are slow to form and always feel genuine because they are so hard-won. He has an inward quality, and by his own admission needs time to recharge himself after being out in the world. There is a hole in his ear where he wears an earring when he isn't on harvest, and we occasionally joke that his true identity is as a hipster. But this is merely a joke, because he is no hipster. He is the son of a farmer who never went to college, which makes Juston a bridge between worlds. He likes language and the analysis of ideas in a way I find comforting and familiar, while his fellow farmers often tease him about his college talk. Now we are driving onto Dwayne's property. A bonfire is burning slabs of wood and tree branches. "That's how we get rid of trash in the country," Juston says. There are some men, boys really, working on a truck in the lot, and they stare as we park. They are slim and fit, and they all wear jeans and boots. They are a version of the boys I have seen year after year in Nebraska who come to cut our wheat. All are white, and they avert their gazes. Farm boys are shy. Juston has explained to them that I am a writer. "I hope you don't mind," he says, chuckling. "I told them you were from San Francisco, and one of them asked, 'You mean, like, she's a Democrat?'" So that's toward the beginning of the book, right before we head off and begin the process of cutting the wheat. I'm going to read to you a section that's further along in the story after we've been cutting for many weeks and gotten to know each other, and I've had the experience for the first time in my life of going to church every Sunday. Here's a series of events that takes place at the end of a day, toward the end of the day, after some cutting in Colorado. And I've had some time now to watch the way the landscape changes. Something that I tried really hard to convey in this book is the beauty of the plains. And so we are now here in a field in Colorado. The wheat here plays with the light in a way that it did not in Texas, Oklahoma, and Kansas. It looks so pale, as if the land has been bleached. Eric sees me studying the particular color of the fields and tells me that this is white wheat. "We're cutting it for Papa John's," he says. "You know Papa John's?" Michael asks. I say I don't, and he nods. Of course I don't. The men say that they have added 130 acres to cut, which means the farmer has given them more work. At lunch, Eric and Bradford talk like equals, trying to decide in what order to cut the fields. They speak in the laconic, factual style of pilots. It is the stripped-down language of men. I make a note of this. And when Juston and Michael see me writing, they want to know what I've put in the notebook, so I tell them, and they ask me what laconic means. It means using few words, I say. "I don't know, Marie," Michael says. "Just stick to the facts. Don't get too fancy." "I am writing facts," I say, "but this can't be like some term paper." Eric is driving the experimental combine, which he finds finicky. To be truly self-driving, the combine will need to adjust to the land and to the density of the crop it is cutting. So far, the camera is unable to identify the difference between wheat and small bits of weeds. This is crucial because a human operator will adjust the headers and how they grind the material to make sure the hopper gets filled only with wheat or as much as possible. Corn is big enough for the camera to distinguish it from the chaff. Wheat is still too fine. Eric watches the clouds while we eat lunch. "I said they were going to grow and pile," he says. We watch the clouds stack and build and move over us like a shelf. Eric hurriedly finishes his lunch and says something privately to the case engineer, which I assume generally conveys his wish to get the grain out of the field as quickly as possible. In other words, he wants to drive the combine and doesn't want to stop to let the engineer tinker with the settings. The engineer nods and retreats to his pickup. Samuel runs to his truck and begins to follow Eric's combine. They are leaving the grain cart out of the process. For a while, they continue like this, pushing hard, and the other combine operators too head into the field. I sit with Juston in his truck, but the clouds continue to form. To the west, I see strong lightning and vertical lines. They are bright white, and it appears there will be no way to avoid the rain. Then the wall fractures and the clouds break up. The wind is blowing the wheat hard. Over the CB radio, Bethany says the elevator reports that hail is coming. It begins to rain, and all the combines race to unload whatever they have into the truck, and then the crew tarps the truck to try to keep the grain dry. Eric moves into a pickup and I follow him. He sits in the driver's seat and reads the clouds, looking for a break. Finally, he texts the farmer to say that we are 25 acres short and he doesn't think there will be hail. "Can you check the radar?" he asks me. I look. So far, nothing appears to be heading for us tomorrow. We linger, hoping for a miracle, but the rain does not stop. We watch bold lightning, and at one point a sharp rainbow arches over the sky. Michael parks just beneath it. The other trucks line up one by one beside him where the stubble is hard. We go to pick them up. Michael slides into the pickup and tells me he looked up laconic. "It says few words to the point of rude." I suggest that laconic is a poetic term. Juston starts arguing with me. "I don't think Eric is laconic. He doesn't use a lot of words," I say. "That's terse." "Terse is rude," I say. "It's really important that you don't exaggerate in the book," Michael says. Bradford has everyone else with him in the other pickup, and he drives off, and we drive off too. Our campsite is by a racetrack, and that night there is a stock car race. When we return to the park, the air is already thick with the smell of diesel, and the crew tells me it will only get worse. The noise will get worse too. "You ever been to one?" Eric asks me. "It's a white trash thing." I haven't, of course. "It's dusty," Eric says, "and loud." Emily, Juston, and Michael are not going. "Are you going?" I ask Eric. I am determined to show that I am enthusiastic about everything. It's the only way I can think of for the crew to relax around me. "I'm thinking about it," Eric says. We eat dinner in the trailer. I tell them about the UN report predicting a food shortage by 2050. I bring up the fact that we have cultivated 37% of the planet, and that unless we deforest the planet, there will not be enough arable land for us to grow all our food. Then I say that we may have to find food from another source. Our forefathers came here, for example, and used this land to develop more food for a growing population. We might need to go to another planet one day. I remind everyone that Eric had brought up Mars back in Texas. Then I want to know if God could go to Mars and how our concept of God would change once we got there. Eric furrows his brow and appears to be considering my question. Bradford tries hard not to laugh. Michael is the first to speak. "So you want us to manipulate time in order to go to other planets, and if that's true, aren't you trying to be like God, and isn't that wrong? Anyway, man isn't going to be around for too much longer because the end of the world is coming." "Why would we manipulate time?" Juston asks, a little irritated. "We could get to Mars." Then someone mentions Interstellar, one of Eric's favorite films, about a group of plucky survivalists trying to address the dust storms and blights that have affected the Earth's agricultural supply and hence precipitated a food shortage. Only, in Interstellar, the group, under the leadership of Matthew McConaughey's character, doesn't go to Mars, but to a distant yet habitable planet accessed through a wormhole. "We could go to Mars. We could start there," I say. "And how long would that take?" Amos asks. I always read that the estimated travel time is 9 months. We would need to make the planet habitable, but that would be possible. What does the Bible say about other planets? I ask. I know that this entire line of questioning is bizarre. I can't stop myself. Emily remembers something in the Bible about another flock. She quotes from John, "I have other sheep too that are not in this sheepfold. I must bring them also. They will listen to my voice, and there will be one flock and one shepherd." Isn't that how the Mormons justify their religion? She breaks off when Eric interrupts. That's not other planets. But that's how they try to justify Jesus showing up in America, she protests. Jesus showed up in America? I ask. That's a Mormon thing, Eric says. What do you mean? Eric purses his lips. He does this when he has to take more time to explain something than he is accustomed to because there are so many pieces of information to engage, and he can't rely on pliers to fix the situation. The Mormons believe that Jesus was here in the New World, and there's something about how he taught the people who were here, the Native Americans, Emily says. Well, they say it's the Indians, but I don't know. Anyway, they justified that through this one line of scripture about other sheep in other places, but I don't know that the gospel was talking about other planets. Everyone is quiet for a minute, and then Samuel says, "We needed God to get to the New World. How could we go without faith?" Eric smiles broadly. The crew pounces on the topic now. All at the same time, they tell me that the Bible made it clear that God created the heavens and our world. He created everything. It stands to reason that he created all the other planets too, including the ones that we would one day inhabit. Eric jokes that if we go to Mars, he will be sure to take Luther because Luther doesn't take up too much room and can communicate with most any machine. The crew laughs. Then Amos becomes impassioned, and his face is overtaken with emotion. And he's ruddy and flushed, and his brow is pinched so he almost looks on the brink of pain, and I see that he is there. He is there on Mars with Luther and the farming equipment, trying to raise food for humanity. He announces that God is so much greater than just Mars, so of course God would be with us. He created the universe. People think that man is equal to God, and he is not. God would be there with us. I think people are greedy and want too much, and this is partly why we don't get enough food. If we weren't so greedy, we wouldn't run out of food in the first place. Won't God destroy the planet first? Michael asks. No, I say. I think that someone like Eric Wolgemuth would want to go wherever he could go next, and that would be outer space. Eric agrees. There is no more world to discover. No more west to uncover. We need to go out and up into space next, and our faith will guide us and take us there. How will our prayers change, I ask. Eric thinks about this. About the same, he says. Give us safe passage. Help us get this part. Except it'll take the parts longer to get to Mars, Samuel says. 9 months for delivery. If the part's even been manufactured, Amos adds. For a moment, everyone is deflated. Then Samuel suggests that a 3D printer might come in handy, and Amos remembers having seen one that was used to make parts. It would be like that out there on Mars. We would need a new bolt, and Luther would make one with the 3D printer. And then we wouldn't have to wait for Earth to send replacements. And we wouldn't need engineers. We would only need Luther and Bradford and Samuel, and everything that would break would be fixed. Then the crew is quiet, and we, most of us, sit there for a while, and we are not in a trailer in Colorado, waiting for the wheat to dry and looking forward to a white trash car race. We are on Mars, attempting to save humanity. Not everyone is there. I can see that Michael doesn't find this idea enticing, nor does Bradford. Michael catches me outside the trailer when dinner is over. He tells me, revelation is coming. He tells me that humans will not last much longer because God is coming, and there is no reason to go to Mars or anywhere else or to worry about increasing the food supply because God will come and judge us, and Earth will not last. It is terrible to hear this. I thought we were ready to risk our safety for the chance to save humanity from hunger. I can't believe he means what he says. It must be some other voice that has been planted in him, or some recording he has heard somewhere that he parrots back to me now. How can someone so young and full of promise believe in what is essentially a death wish? I wonder how adults could teach this to their children. As a parent, I feel an essential responsibility to leave the world more intact for my child and other young people than it was for me. What, Michael says, enrages me. I want to double over from grief because of this lie Michael has been told. Don't believe this, I want to say. But I don't say it. And so because I am a coward at this moment, I ask instead, are you going to the racetrack? No, he grins. I'm going to maybe see if Juston wants to play basketball, but it's loud, Marie, and it smells terrible. You'll see. He whirls around and walks away then, that wiry, tense frame gliding off toward the boys' trailer. I can't read his move. Eric comes out of the trailer and smiles at me. Want to go? He tilts his head toward the stadium, which is already roaring and buzzing with engines, so I follow him. It is terrifically loud in the stadium. We climb the stairs to the bleachers, and a sign directs us to go right if we want beer, and left if we don't. We sit on the left. I think I'll stop there.
Thanks, Marie, for that fantastic reading. We appreciate it. And I wanted to also introduce Juston, who you've heard a thing or two about so far already today. And so we wanted to sort of, again, open up this sort of event now for your questions. I have some questions. Some of them are from students who've already sort of sent their questions ahead of time. And again, if you have a question for Marie or Juston or both, please feel free to jump in. I wanted to start with a sort of a quick question about sort of the organization or the beginning of the book. And there are a lot of guiding questions in the book, and one of them that sort of comes up early is the question of why some farmers and harvesters who are conservative Christians are okay with GMOs, while people in the city who believe in evolution are more obsessed with organic food. And did you have a sort of an embryonic idea of the book project when you were coming up with that question? Or so this is kind of a chicken or egg question.
So, I mean, that was the question. I mean, it really was the idea of the book was born the way that I describe it in that scene. It's maybe 15, maybe 16, 17 years ago now. I was in Nebraska, sitting in our Quonset with my father and uncle and cousin, and I was living in New York City at the time, and I had told my friends, you know, I'm going to Nebraska for the wheat harvest, which is not something that most people who live in New York City do. And so my friends all said, you know, what are you doing? And so I tried to explain to them what I was doing. And the first question most people asked me was, is your farm organic? And I said, nah, I don't think so. No. And then I realized, you know, there was this sort of tremendous difference in the way that people I knew on the farm viewed farming, viewed food, really, and the way that my friends in the city did. And I wasn't. I at the time I was. It was Eric who said, you know, Marie, you're talking about the divide. He saw it as a division in culture. I didn't see it so clearly at the time. But I also thought, wow, you know, there's no book about farming, and this is a fascinating world with people who have incredible, seemingly endless skills. It should be written about because, you know, nobody knows how this works, and it's a vital part of how we survive as a culture, as a country. And so, you know, I'm not a farmer. I don't, like I say in that scene, I don't even really know how to drive a tractor. But I thought, well, maybe I'll write about it.
We had I had a student who wrote in and had a very kind of basic question, but I thought was an interesting one, which is, did the people in your book read it? And if so, what did they think of it? I'm guessing too that Juston probably read it. I would imagine. I don't.
Yeah.
So yeah, that would be. So this would be kind of a question you might both weigh in on.
Juston probably knows more who read it and who didn't. I mean, Juston read it. I did an unusual thing. When it was pretty far along toward it, I mean, the first draft of this was extremely long, and I did a lot of editing work on it, and then I gave it to Juston and to Eric and to Emily, and the three of them read it. And that's, that's not normally what happens in a process like this, but there would be no book without them. And I wanted them to see what I had written. So they had it, and we made really very few changes. Eric wanted the names changed for some of the crew. So we did change some names. So there was the day when Juston and I were on the phone coming up with aliases for everybody, which was kind of fun. And you want to talk about, like, I don't know if anybody else read it. I don't think anybody, well, people in your family did, I guess.
Right,
Your brother did, your aunt did.
Yeah, I think actually a good number of my family read it, and I think some of the guys that were on the crew that year.
Oh, that's right. Michael read it.
Yeah, and the audio book that was available to some of them, so they enjoyed that, or didn't enjoy it, perhaps. But yeah, I loved it. I mean, I really felt invested in it throughout the process. So in a lot of ways, it's definitely Marie's book, but I also kind of want my name a little bit below Marie on the cover. I say that in jest, of course, but
no,
yeah.
I think that's fair. Juston was a huge part. I mean, Juston plays an important. I mean, he really was sort of almost like a tour guide for me and explaining to me what I was seeing. I don't know why at this hour I have to have such an active cat in the background. I don't even know where the cat came from. Anyway, but Juston interpreted for me a lot of the theology, and there were scenes, especially in the beginning of the book, where we go to church and we leave church and I have absolutely no idea what the pastor has said, even though it's in English, and Juston basically translated it for me so that I could understand it. And so a lot of my understanding of, I think, of theology comes from you. So yeah, you were completely vital to the as I understand what's happening. A lot of that is because you were explaining it to me. So when people say that they understand something more about agriculture and Christianity, I mean, that's partly because you were able to help me understand what was happening, what I was seeing.
Yeah, I'm glad. I kind of think about it in terms of Marie and my dad being opposites in many ways, and I kind of come in not fitting in either realm from which they come, and I get to act as that mediator. So all the stars align to have a pretty revealing experience, I think.
If anybody in your family or the crew read it and didn't like it at all, nobody said so. I mean, Michael asked why his name was changed. I think, that's the only thing he ever said to me.
I was thinking too about when you were talking about sort of the experience, Marie, of going to these church services, right, which was a new cultural experience, and how Juston was, in many ways, he would talk about, well, this is this sort of sermon, this is a seeker sermon, this is a different kind of sermon. And so I think it's interesting how his sort of knowledge of or familiarity with this, what I'll call a genre, I mean, they call many other things, what was illuminating for you about understanding that. But I'm wondering, Juston, if we could turn that around too, to think, as you were sort of there experiencing Marie experiencing these different kinds of sermons, did any of that give you a kind of a new kind of perspective on what was going on?
I do think it heightened my kind of processing of it. Like I was listening to it knowing that there's someone here that really doesn't know what like sanctification means or justification or these things that are kind of thrown around in a lot of sermons. So I kind of listened along with Marie and sort of saw the things anew anyway. Like I was sort of on that process myself, but having Marie there added like a real life person to think about how is she understanding this, and then we could have those conversations afterward. So that definitely fueled into that.
Sure. I was thinking as well that there's a great aphorism that shows up in the book several times, which is certain conditions yield certain things. And I think it's originally something that Eric says, but I don't recall precisely. But then it keeps coming up, and Marie, you bring it in, it resurfaces in different contexts. And I was wondering if you could say a little bit about how that aphorism helped you think about shaping the book, or like, and what, how you knew that would keep paying off as you were getting deeper and deeper into your subject.
I think I thought a lot about how, well, I mean, I had a little bit of a pre-existing way of, I've been thinking about this lately, of thinking about farming, and that my mother is from Japan, and farmers in Japan have historically been highly respected. It's not a profession that is looked down on. It's a profession that's respected. And so she said that a lot to me. And there's a way in which people are very much seen as a product of the place where they live. And I think I thought when we were on the road when I was on the road with the harvesting crew, I would think to myself, I'm watching people engage with the land in a really direct way, and it's not a theoretical way. Like I have a lot of friends in the city who think they know what Middle America is because they read a bunch of news reports or they follow what is said in social media and think that they have a sense of what the Great Plains is. But when you interact with a place and see people interacting with the land, you get a different story than like some little sound bite. So I really was trying to pay attention to what is the culture of this place that I'm in, and how does it yield human experience, and what do people believe as a result of working the land in the way that they do where they are. I thought about that, and I think I've been thinking increasingly, there is something about the way that we live now where the news comes to us from all over the world, and we think that we have like a holistic view of everything. But actually we're still physically only in one location at any one time. And that shapes very much what our experience is. So we sort of like feel like we know everything, but really we're, only in one place. And so I was thinking a lot about that as I was trying to put the story together.
And there's a question too that came from the audience, which I think we could ask both of you in it's a slightly different way. And what was your favorite part about this journey? And Marie, you've done this once, right? And Justin, you've been there for that journey that was shared, but you've also, that's not your first rodeo too. You've done this. So you would have maybe both a different perspective on that.
Yeah, I mean, it was, I was going to say my favorite part was the end. It was a very difficult summer and didn't end up kind of how I expected it to or hoped that it would. But I guess more seriously, my favorite part was having Marie along the way. And it landed in such a good time in my life when I was asking my own questions and I think processing a lot of things. So it felt like having a wise friend along the way. And it didn't just feel like that. Like, that's what it was. So yeah, Marie being there for the trip was my favorite part.
Your turn, Marie.
Well, I think it was an extraordinary privilege to get to go. I mean, it's not something that most people get to do. This is a very, it's a very proud profession and very protective, and so to be allowed in was a privilege. It was amazing to see how beautiful the country was, and to get to go through those rhythms day after day, the sun rising, the sun setting. I learned so much about American history that I don't think I would have learned. I might have read books, but it's completely different when you're reading history and you're in the place and you can go see where things happened. And I did, we did have a lot of conversations about what is Christianity? Why is it still here? It's been 2,000 years. What is it? And I think having really serious conversations about that was also a privilege, and watching people practicing faith in a sincere way, I found extraordinary. And the people that I met, and then every time I would have a real experience or see somebody who was having a real experience, I thought that was amazing. And it's forever changed the way that I look at a number of things in the world, and relate to people and to history. So I guess it's not one thing. Also, Emily is an amazing cook. So food was pretty fantastic.
And sort of picking up on something, Marie, that you said earlier, one of our sort of audience members was wondering why you think farmers are not held in the same esteem in the U.S. as they are in Japan.
Oh gosh, I don't know. It's funny, of all the things I looked at, I didn't look into why. I remember there was this time, there was the Super Bowl. I was living in New York City at the time, and I think Ford ran an ad for this pickup truck. And the whole theme of the ad, do you remember this, Justin? The whole theme for the ad was like, "And God made a farmer," or something like that. And your dad, Eric, called me and said, there's a lot of conversation about this ad. Is anybody talking about it in New York? And I said, not really. It's an ad that came and went, and he had this consciousness that this ad was kind of validating the profession of farmer, and wondering if that had resonated at all with any of my peers, which it didn't. They didn't even, I don't think they even noticed. I don't really know the answer. And I didn't really investigate it in this book, although we did talk a lot about the difference between book learning, higher education, formal education, and practical education. There's a scene in the book where Justin and I are talking about, or maybe we're talking about you, Justin, and how you're different from everybody else on the crew. And Emily says it's college that makes the difference. Like college, just so there are these wonderful characters in the book who are always taking apart engines and putting engines back together again. I remember one morning in Idaho, there's a character in the book named Georgie, and he walks by and he's taken apart the dash of a pickup because he just felt like it, and it needed to be put back together again. And that's just a skill that people don't have anymore. And so I almost wonder if it's just not even understanding what it is that farmers do. And the fact that such a small percentage of people now actually do the farming and the harvesting, et cetera. And we have, over 90% of people who live in urban areas, and live in a very different world and a very different reality, and have a very different skill set. somebody once said to me, it's almost like they have a different operating system, and that kind of difference leads to not respecting, not understanding, stereotyping others, right?
What, Justin? What's your take on this question?
Yeah, I don't know much about Japanese farmers, but I did think too, like with my brother and my dad especially, they'll often, if we're talking about a philosophical idea or political or something, they'll give their take, and then it's kind of couched in like, well, I'm just a dumb farmer, so like, what do I know? And there's that sort of it's almost a type of a defense mechanism, I think, of like belittling their opinion before it can be belittled. But there is an entirely different set of knowledge, kind of like Marie was talking about, of like real life skills of fixing your car or building something in your home, that I think farmers have this like creaturely knowledge, but lack the I don't know, some of the wordy stuff that is, I think, more valued often in society. And I wonder if Japanese farmers wouldn't have as much of a disparity in that way.
I mean, just off the top of my head, I will say that Japan is a real food-obsessed culture. Like, everybody loves food and loves high quality food. And, I've never really had this experience of like someone in Japan not wanting to eat something. Just across class and across gender, everybody likes to eat and likes to eat everything. And so beautifully prepared meat, vegetables, seafood are valued across class. And our culture of food is a little bit different in the United States.
I was thinking too, sort of when you've been talking sort of about, and you've both been talking about sort of Eric, and I was thinking about, and Marie, you were bringing up it was Emily's point about college as being kind of the dividing line, or the thing that's separating some people from others, and that feels right in many ways when you're reading the book, and at the same time, I think it seems like that's a useful shorthand, but still so kind of limited as well. And that I think about kind of Eric at different times in the book will just come out to you, and he's really interested and curious about things, and he'll say, why do people in the cities what do they think about this? That he's curious as heck.
He's a tremendously open-minded person.
Yes, and also too that sort of Michael is also sort of going to college, and he in many ways is engaging in these conversations, but also like you can kind of sense different gradations in terms of what seems like an open topic of conversation and what seems closed off, and it seems like a really complicated question. The college is part of it, but maybe.
What's really interesting is Justin and I would have this shorthand where we would talk about, in your world this, in my world that. And when I would mention that to any of my peers, they were very unconvinced by the idea that our worlds are different. And yet I think for Justin it was really, and I would say this to him, they don't think that there's a difference in our worlds, even though none of them have ever, been in a combine. They're convinced that there's no difference in worlds. And yet for Justin, and I think you were very clear on that there's a difference between the experience you've had growing up and the what we would call the people in the city. So I almost wonder if there's an assumed sameness, among knowledge workers, for lack of a better term, that somebody who is from a rural environment feels more deeply, feels the difference. So there's a different perception of what the difference is, or that there's a difference.
Yeah, I would think too that farmers and the more, if we call them a rural type, like I think many of them are also not aware of the difference in the city. So it's not just that the city people are not understanding the country people. I think it's the both sides not really being able to wrap their minds around how other people are thinking about things.
Or how it's different. I mean, Eric would say that. Eric used to say, well, no, I think people from the country should go to the city. He'd say, we need to go to the city to see what's there. I remember he was really adamant about that.
There's that brief moment in the book where I don't remember it's even at the beginning where you mentioned, so almost offhand, it's in passing, it's not a scene you go into, but about how, Eric, and I don't know if it's Eric and Emily, but are visiting you in New York.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And they're going to the Whole Foods, and the whole idea of organic foods has been come up again and again. And Eric is going in thinking, what is this about? And so he's walking around. And he comes out and he wants to tell you very, very clearly, right, that I don't know if the word is scam, but it's like
marketing. He says this is all marketing, and I don't want you to fall for it. Yeah.
Yeah. But it also just gave me a sense of pleasure we see you in the fields with the group, with the family, and it's sort of just a wonderful image to have of Eric wandering in the city, going to dinner at some sort of, as you explained, going out to dinner at these sort of restaurants. This is part of the experience. This is part of.
There are some other incidents like that that don't make it into the book, because we continued our cultural exchange when Juston and Michael came to see me in San Francisco for spring break, and I made them go straight from the airport to eat dim sum for the first time. That was your first dim sum, right?
I believe it was, yeah.
Yeah, and then I said, now you have to eat soup dumplings. and then I guess, gosh, it was just January. You and Eric came to San Francisco, and you wanted him to eat soup dumplings, and I found soup dumplings. And Eric's hand, as we learn in the book, he had a pretty severe farming accident as a young man, so he doesn't have full mobility in one of his hands. And I was sitting there saying, well, you have to hold the soup dumpling over the spoon and bite a hole and drain the dumpling. And he looked at me like, are you serious?
Yeah.
This is like a ridiculous effort that has to go into eating one dumpling. But so we've continued to have these kind of cultural exchanges.
It's interesting to think too, as we're talking about, like one of the cliches that we would use is like talking about bridging a cultural divide. I mean, it's a cliche, but we're talking about a very real thing. One way that I'm used to thinking about it, at least because I'm a reader and this is a thing I do. I'm a professor. I'm hopeless, right? But I think, conversation, right? You have conversation and you talk across these. You talk with other people. People who are not always like you, and of course that takes a certain kind of effort for most people, because you're surrounded mostly by people like you who came up, who are from places with certain conditions, and you're producing certain yields, right? This is what you have.
That's right.
But there's a part of me too that's wondering, and of course now here we are in this socially distanced world, right, with COVID, and we are talking. We weren't able to bring you to Minnesota, right? And we're talking across, and Justin's in Pennsylvania, right? Marie's in California. We're here in Minnesota. But as we talk about this, I'm almost wondering if actually being in these other places is a real part of it too. The conversation is part of it, but being present in another physical space is going to give you a different kind of understanding that goes beyond conversation, or it goes hand in hand with.
Absolutely, and that was part of what I was trying to say with the different conditions yield different things. I told Juston I had an argument the other day with a really good friend of mine who's the bulk of his time is spent in New York, LA, and San Francisco. And I said, but you've never been to a farm. You don't actually know any of the people who raise the food that you eat. And there's a lot of that. And whenever I would say something like that to Justin would say to me, well, but there are a lot of people from the country who've never actually spent time in the city, and understood why somebody would want to live in the city. But absolutely, our realities are just sort of the narrative, the phrases that we say, and now we're in a really charged time where we have a very strong us against them mentality, and what you're supposed to say to sort of defend your physician, it makes conversation very, very difficult. And most of us are surrounded by people who are quote unquote like us. So it makes crossing that chasm very challenging.
And I was thinking too, Justin, about, because now you are sort of just outside of a major city, right? Or just sort of in the outskirts. And you're also someone who's gone through sort of like, you're doing graduate training right now. And I'm wondering if the years you've spent living, at least, and I don't know how far outside the city, but outside, if that kind of closeness to an urban center has in some way accelerated or shaped or changed your journey in some ways.
Yeah, I'd say 100%. My freshman year in undergraduate, I did an urban ministry focus. So I spent a lot of time in Philadelphia, is the city I'm near. And yeah, the experiences in that first year program were, I think it was a year before Marie and the whole book experience. And the amount of data that entered into my thinking was like, it took years to make sense of that. So yeah, I don't even really know if I can give a good answer, but it was just lots and lots of examples of people living in entirely different realities, and me being thrown back and forth in those, thinking like, how do I make sense of this? How do I even put words to this? So it really put me at a standstill in a lot of ways. It's quite paralyzing, I think, the differences that people are experiencing in the same state 2 or 3 counties over, or in the same county. It's pretty unreal to me.
I think that I'm thinking about that. I'm thinking about experiences. My father went off to the Peace Corps and went to Nigeria in the late '60s, and had lived a very sort of sheltered, small town Connecticut life, and it was life changing. And there's a part of me that kind of wonders: are we in a place where the best way for us to bridge these sort of divides is almost to have internal, like, city kids going into the country and doing things, and country kids going into the city? Like we actually need to sort of pick ourselves up and transport ourselves in a way.
There is one professor at Stanford who works on this topic of the urban and rural divide, who wonders if this is something that we need to deal with. I mean, I think we can see that there are really sharp differences and experiences that we're having in the United States, depending on where we are. And, I in general think that it would be helpful to be able to have conversations about those differences that are constructive. That would be my preference. Go ahead.
We'll have to leave it at that. That sounds fantastic. We're at the end of this hour, and now I just want to keep talking. But I really want to thank both of you for coming and being part of this conversation, and Marie for writing such a fantastic book, and for reading for us tonight. And I want to thank Fine Arts Programming for stage managing this event, and Manitou Fund for supporting our reading series, and the Sister Mariella Gable Prize. And again, thanks to you both. Thank you, everyone in the audience, for joining us.
Thank you, Justin.
Absolutely.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much.
So, good night, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Good night. Take care. Stay safe. Go visit other people in other places.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye-bye.